Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition, a Zoom edition with School Committee woman Sarah Rodricks. First interview with Sarah. So, Sarah, welcome and thank you for agreeing to do this after work.
Sure. No, it's not after work. It's between work.
Oh, between you're one of those, huh?
Yeah, I'm one of those, and that's okay.
Let me start out with something that's not even school related. Um, you are a clinician. Did I read that right? Are you a
Yep,
counselor? Yeah.
I am. I'm a independent clinical social worker.
So like an MSW type
I have an
license.
MSW. Yep. I'm a licensed
Oh,
independent clinical social worker. I have my MSW, and I'm actually pursuing my doctorate.
oh, cool. And I'm asking because I spent 25 years as a substance abuse clinician, so I'm very interested in that field. Um, okay, great. So that comes in handy with the kids too, I
Hmm.
imagine. Great. Okay, Sarah, let's get right
It
to it.
does.
Today, I heard from the governor's office that they're going to drop the mask mandate on the 28th of February, and they were going to leave it up to school districts if they, excuse me, if they chose to follow it or have a policy of their own.
Hmm.
Your feedback?
I mean, I am one voice on the school committee, and I haven't been able to listen to the governor's uh, his press conference earlier today because I was working all day.
Mhm.
I do know that when we make decisions, that we really should be making them collaboratively. So we've got to be able to talk to our board of health. We've got to be able to talk with our individual schools. We've got to look at what is the cost benefit analysis of doing that. And I don't know the answer to that right now, but
Sure.
my plan is to look at all of the information so that way we can make an educated decision. Because while most of our kids are going to be fine, we
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah. Sure.
And we do know that, it's the kids are pretty good about wearing masks. The kids really don't complain much. I have a 6-year-old who's in kindergarten, and she's funny because she's like, kindergartners are gross. Like, I want them to wear a mask all the time. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, they can be. We know that it's been really hard for them
Yeah. Yeah. I guess what my
to
my
mask up and
concern
not,
was.
right? There's a piece of social emotional development.
Yeah. So I think the only concern I have is often when the government is involved, right? So they put these mandates, and now you have to follow them.
Hmm.
Then they remove them, but then they put this little added piece to it that says, well, if Fall River decides they want to keep them, they can go ahead and keep them. So
Right.
it's not a mandate of no mask. You know what I mean?
It's a
And
lot of mixed messaging.
exactly, yeah,
Right.
yeah. How are kids doing? Do you have any idea um, in the school system in general? Do we have a high rate, a low rate, a medium rate of infections?
So they're definitely going down. I think in general, when we've looked at the numbers, the schools have not been the biggest transmission of COVID. We certainly have
Okay,
had lots of kids and lots of staff members out with COVID. That's been
yeah,
from the beginning. There's no question. But in terms of whether or not they're getting it from other kids in the school, that's kind of hard to say. We haven't had that concrete data to say that's what's happening. I am concerned about the timing of dropping that mask mandate
uh
because
huh.
it's the Friday after school vacation from yeah, it's the Friday
Oh, that's
after
right.
school vacation.
You're
And
right.
so I'm a little concerned about that because we
Mhm.
know that the infection rates go up after any kind of vacation.
Yeah,
So if we're going to do that, I would prefer to wait an extra week at
yeah.
least to kind of see how things stabilize, and then like let's figure out what to do from there. So the timing, I'm not thrilled about that.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that into play because that is a little weird, right? That
Yeah.
school vacation, and then when you come back, hey, guess what, kids, wide open, but we don't know what they've done for the last 7 days.
Right.
Uh,
And so
and yeah,
it's tricky, and
yeah,
I can see, I truly can see the frustration about the masks. I get it. I can also tell you that we know that it has kept a lot of people safe. I've got a kid I have 3 children, and one of them is uh, immunodeficient. So his immune system doesn't work in the same way.
Yeah,
He's also had a long history of lung issues. So if he were to get sick, it would be a lot more detrimental for him than it would be for my other two children.
absolutely.
Right. And so we've got to wait. We've got tons of those kids in our district. So we've got to really look at what's going to be the safest for
Okay.
the greatest majority of our kids. Right. But right after vacation, that worries me a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense too. Yeah. So, just to piggyback on that for one more question, I got some paperwork from the school department recently, and it was pertaining to in-school testing and stay in school
Test and
program. I
stay.
think
Yep.
test and stay. Yeah.
Yep.
So explain that to the people who may not understand that, please.
So test and stay is an initiative that's been really like throughout the country. Districts have been picking this up. So what happens is, just say my little one is in class and she is exposed to, and exposed is defined very clearly, right? They have to be in contact with someone for more than 15 minutes. And that person had to have been within 48 hours of infection. So just say that she's friends with little Johnny and little Johnny ends up testing positive. Well, the day before she was with little Johnny and she was with him at her table in the classroom. What they can do is, now that they know that my daughter is exposed to this kid who has COVID, they are going to test her every day for 5 days that she comes into school to see if she develops a COVID infection. And so what that'll do is it'll allow her to not miss school that whole time. And we can have her in school safely because we know that she's not testing positive at that point. Now, we know that tests are not 100% accurate, but just say a COVID test comes back negative, and in fact, a PCR says that they're positive. What
Yeah.
we do know is that the viral load that that child has is really low and unlikely to be contagious.
Right.
So could
Right.
they be carrying at that point? Maybe, but the
So,
likelihood is really low.
so let me ask you, what do we do with the asymptomatic?
Well, if they test positive, they can't be in
Yeah.
school.
So asymptomatic, no symptoms, got to go home. That's the way it goes?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you're positive. So if you had enough to test positive, that means you have enough to spread to other people. So even though you feel fine, I'm
Yeah.
thrilled that you feel fine.
Yeah.
But if the other kid gets it, if that were my son, if my son gets it, that's going to be a scary thing for him.
I got you. Yeah, there may be a kid with a compromised immune system who gets it and he doesn't go asymptomatic. He goes full blown, right?
Exactly. And that
I
kid
got
ends
you.
up in the hospital, right? So
Sure.
if it's the same thing though, like if you tested positive for strep, but you felt fine and you're not on antibiotics for 48 hours, you can't be in school yet, or 24
Sure.
hours, whatever it is, right?
Right.
It's the same thing with the flu. You might feel fine. I don't know anybody that feels fine with the flu, but just
Yeah.
say, right, you have a
Yeah.
very mild case of the flu. If you have the flu, you really can't be in school around other people.
Yeah, because they're going to get it, and then we're going to have everybody in the school. Then it goes, and the thing that I was telling someone about is, my concern is not as much with the little kids who stay in the class all day. It's the ones who change class repeatedly, 4 or 5 times a
Right.
day. That's where you have the problem.
Right. They're everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. So listen, how are things going? You're brand new, and I don't expect to hear wonders. But how is it going? I know that you did speak to someone, and you said that everybody was great to you. They helped you before you even got to your first meeting,
Yep.
which they're very good at, from everything I understand. But
Yep.
how is it going after a couple of meetings?
Honestly, it's been the same, where people have been really open to communicating. I think this is, and that's not to say that the previous committees weren't, but I think this is a really solid team that wants to see some positive things happen in the district. And I think this is also a team of people that are very open to having more difficult conversations and letting it just play out. Like, let's have that hard conversation and let's talk about it,
Yeah.
because otherwise we're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, I think
So
that's I think that that is from my research on you, which wasn't much because there's not a lot out there. That's good for you, uh, but just some people who have
I live
known
a
you.
pretty boring life, Gene. I've
Yeah,
got,
it seems that way, right?
you know, I
But
work, I got kids,
they
you know.
did say that they felt that you and Shelley in particular were probably going to be the ones that won't be afraid to tackle a controversial issue. That
Yeah.
because the conversation was about sweeping things under the rug, not being transparent like we seen for unfortunately with some of the members last time.
Hmm.
And they were saying that they didn't think that you and Shelley would stand by and allow that. And we know that Kevin speaks out, so
Hmm.
that's pretty good. Do you feel that way?
I think it's a matter of nobody's got time for that. So when you say there's not much out there about me, that's mainly because it's if something comes up, I'm going to deal with it and then I'm going to move on. And so
Yeah,
there's really no point in kind of pretending like things aren't happening, or let's just play to people because we're friends with this one or
yeah,
friends with that one. That's
yeah,
not what people are here for. And I don't have
yeah.
time for that. So,
Good,
you know,
good. And I
and
know,
and I think Shelley feels the same way, and I
yeah,
want to say that everybody on that committee feels that way. So if we can set a good precedent of like, hey, let's just talk about things. It doesn't have to
yeah,
be this difficult. Then we're gonna
yeah.
be okay.
Yeah. Well, I hope so, because we did have some difficult times, which we'll leave there in the past. And I was saying to this individual that, with you and Shelley in particular having experience in social work in general, right?
Mhm.
We know from our training that you have to get to the root cause of issues. You have to
Mhm.
address the issues, or they only get bigger and not only bigger, but they bring in outside issues. So
Right.
I thought that that was good to have a couple of you guys on that have that mentality. So you'll say like, hey, if we don't nip this now, we're gonna have a big problem next month, next year.
So, Jean, it's funny that you see that though, because you have Shelley and Paul Hart, who both work in social work roles for DTA.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be trained as social workers, but they work in
Yeah.
that role.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
you have Mimi, who has worked with youth and families at the Boys and Girls Club for her entire career. And again, like even though not trained as a social worker, still works in a very similar realm.
Mm-hmm.
You have me and Kevin, who are both trained as social workers, and you have Bobby, who works in housing as a coordinator, right, for their system. So again, like you have another person that even though they may not have the same background, which I think is actually a really good thing, right? It would be a
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
thing if they all had the same background.
Yeah.
We all are coming from places where we're used to dealing with multiple challenges, multiple systems, and trying to navigate those.
And
So
I'm
I
and
think
I
that's
think
good.
yeah, more importantly, not only trained to deal with those situations, but keeping up front that you deal with them now. you
Mhm.
know now and again I'm not going to use names and I'm not going to use last time, um but sometimes our background, even though we may know better, there's pressures in
Right.
politics, that there's pressures, there's friendships, and it can sometimes have you not talk when you really should, and we'll leave that there. But I'm looking for good things from you guys. Now here comes a tough question. um CRT.
Mhm.
And a lot of people in the city that talk about CRT are concerned, um, because obviously, if you look up CRT and what it really means, it's not what a lot of is being talked about in the media.
Right.
It's um, we don't have it in our school at this time.
Mhm.
Are we going in that direction? Do you know?
That would be a state decision. The state is what determines the standards, not each individual district. So that would be at the state level, not at the local level, that those decisions would be made. I know that there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of misconception about CRT. I can tell you that it is something that is taught at a not even an undergrad level, typically at a graduate or doctoral level. That's what's taught. So there is no such thing as a CRT curriculum.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's really important to understand. That's not
Yeah.
what it is. When you talk about teaching CRT, that's something that happens in grad school or the doctoral level. There could be a handful of courses at the undergraduate level, but that's really not typical either. I
Yeah.
think what most school districts are trying to do is have people represented, right? So I'm full-blooded Portuguese. My parents are Portuguese immigrants, and I went to a French Canadian Catholic school growing up. And I can tell you that I used to get super excited whenever somebody told a story about a Portuguese person, right? A Portuguese explorer. It would be
Yeah.
exciting because it was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's my background. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think what districts are trying to do is just have more representation because those things matter to people,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
important. Jean, you were very excited, right, when we came on because you were like, hey, I've worked in this field too,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
I represent something that you can connect with. I
Right.
think that's
Right.
what we're trying to do with kids.
Yeah.
But as far as like a CRT curriculum, that number one, it doesn't exist. And number two, that wouldn't even happen at the local level. That's a state decision.
Sure.
That's not,
Okay.
we can't just say like, hey, we're going to start teaching,
Right.
this. We,
Okay.
we
So it
can't
would
do
have to
that.
come out of the state. And again, I had heard about it, but I really didn't know much about it. So when I started looking, I said to myself, "There's no way kids are going to understand this." Look,
Because it's not,
yeah,
they can't.
it's just like
Exactly.
it's impossible, you know. I mean, so I found it like really, I just, the media is making a mess out of this, you know.
And
Um,
people start talking about it and they have this idea that it's one thing and it's like, but that's not a thing.
it's like anything else, Sarah, right? We could both read the same curriculum, and I present it with my twist, and you present it the way it's supposed to be presented. I think
Right.
that's what parents should look for. It
Mhm.
is what we're having for curriculums being taught the way it's laid out, or are we bringing our own biases into it? Right?
And we shouldn't do that, but we should be offering some representation to kids, right? So new books in our classroom library have to be about white children living their lives, right? They can be about kids from all different cultures,
Sure.
right? Let's learn about other people's celebrations. Let's
Yeah.
learn about what other people do for traditions, right?
Yeah.
That's just being a good human,
Yeah, I
right?
I agree. I mean, when I don't know about you. I mean, I'm much older than you, but when I was in school, we learned about everything. I mean,
Mhm.
history. I don't think we have the history in school that we used to have. And we learned about cultures and who discovered this and who discovered that, and was Indians for this and Portuguese explorers. There was
Yep.
a ton of them, fishermen, right? Tons of them,
Hmm.
and but we learned about that in
Yeah.
primary school. You know.
I learned about that stuff in school. And, even I went to Catholic school, like I said, but even in Catholic school, we learned about world religions. We didn't learn just about Catholicism. We learned about
Right.
Buddhism and we learned about Judaism. And you know what? I think that made us more well rounded students
Yeah.
because we saw that there was a world outside of Fall River. We saw that there was
Yeah.
a world outside of just what we know right here.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. You have to know everything as much as
Yeah.
possible about any given subject so that you can bring in perspectives, all the different perspectives involved, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so, if you could
Yeah.
name one thing that you would like to work on in your first term, something that you said, when I get on there, this is going to change, or I'm going to do this, what would it be?
Gene, anyone that knows me knows I am not good at picking one thing. I'm
Okay,
very
pick
bad
a
at that.
couple.
So it's going to be a couple of things.
All
So
right.
my top things would be inclusion in the district. Um, when we talk about special education and how we support our kids in special education services, we need to do a better job. And our special education students need to not be or not feel like they're separated from the general education students. So that's definitely one thing. And then the other thing is parent engagement. So the parent engagement subcommittee had been something that had been in place for 5 years, but there really hadn't been, I believe, I was told that there was one meeting back in 2016, and then that group never met again. But parent engagement is a huge piece of what we do. We have a district of 10,000 students. We can't do this without our families. And so we've got to make it so that way families feel like their school is somewhere that they belong. So if I had to pick two, if I can't pick one. So I'm going with two,
Okay.
and actually I'll probably go with three. So along the same lines of special education, I would want to look at what are we doing for our high school students that have been in special education their entire school career.
Oh yeah.
What are we doing to support those kids as they transition out of high school? Right? Because it can be that they're going to college. It can be that they're going into the workforce, but what are we doing to prepare them for that?
Yeah, I think that's lacking in every, not only in school departments. I battled with that as a substance abuse clinician. Like
Mhm.
I used to pound aftercare into my into the
Yes.
guys, and I'd say, like, yeah, they're okay while they're with us because they know they have us, but what are they
Right.
going to do when they leave here? We
Right.
have to set these people up for not for failure, but for success. So,
It's the same thing with all of our kids, not just our special ed kids. All of our kids are going to go somewhere when they graduate. When they finish school, they're going somewhere. Do they
yeah,
have the skills that they need to be successful once they get to that place?
right, yeah. Well, I mean, I think we have a lot of things that need to be fixed. That I think we now have all kinds of money, extra monies,
Hmm.
and I think we need to make sure that that money goes to priorities and not pet projects.
Right.
I was watching the curriculum subcommittee meeting the other day,
Hmm.
and I was kind of flabbergasted at the fact that they were talking about a curriculum that they've been looking at for like 2 years. And it took like 2 years for them to finally get this thing to where they're going to use it. And then I learned that it hadn't even been presented to you guys yet.
You're talking about the Wonders curriculum?
Yeah, I wonders exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't seem right to me.
So typically the process, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, but typically the process would look like there would be this motion to try to use this curriculum in the district. It would get presented to the instructional subcommittee, then it would be brought to the larger committee, and then we would vote on that. But that process didn't happen, or at least not in the way that it was supposed to happen. And I think a
Correct.
million and one things got in the way.
Yeah.
And okay, I get that. But now we've got to look at how are we using this curriculum? So that way a kid at Tansy and a kid at Green are on the same playing field. So if a
Yeah,
family
especially if you get
moves,
transferred or you
yep.
move or something, right?
So if a
You have to
kid
be on the same
moves,
page. Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
way, the fourth grader at Tansy is in the same, the fourth grader at Tansy and the fourth grader at Green and the
Yeah.
fourth grader at Watson are all doing around the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's common
There's
sense,
going to be a
no?
little bit of difference, no matter different groups of
Yeah.
kids. Um,
Sure.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
just
but
normal.
I
But generally, they should be doing the same things.
is that, I mean, I'm wondering because I kind of went to a few schools, and I don't think that I ever transferred to another school and they were doing the same thing. They were always somewhere else, either
Right.
way ahead or way behind. No one was, I couldn't leave on chapter 10 of Columbus and go to another school and be on chapter 10 of Columbus.
Right.
And I would think you would want that. You would want that cohesiveness and structure.
We do want that. So that way, when our kids move on to the next step, so they're in K through 5 education, they're all getting the same thing. When they go
Yeah,
into sixth grade, they're all starting off on a fairly level playing field.
right.
Obviously, with some differences there, and that's okay, but we
Yeah,
shouldn't have these big gaps in difference,
I
right?
agree.
How
Yeah.
one kid at one school is getting this and another kid at that school is getting that. That's not fair.
I'm going to give you one more question because believe it or not, time's flying.
I can
Uh,
talk all day, Gene. All
I
day
know
long, I can talk.
I could too. Well, I'm going to actually learn how to operate this software this week, so I'll be able to do these on my own. I won't have to bring mic into it all the time. So I'll be setting up a lot of them. You'll probably be saying no a lot. But we'll talk a lot. The last question I have for you is, I have been for many, many years trying to talk with the school department about a substance abuse curriculum from K to 12. And I can honestly say that I have been lied to numerous times about curriculums they were working on, curriculums they were looking at, curriculums they were going to purchase. I was even told a few years ago they had one and they were going to implement it. From what I can learn today, we still don't have one. And again, I'm going back to about 1991 when I started talking with them when I was working with kids. And what are we going to do, and when are we going to do it?
I think we have to embed substance abuse prevention curriculum into
Health.
the everyday, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so when we talk about, people get really nervous when we talk about social emotional learning.
Yeah.
But social emotional learning is really
It fits.
just being able to identify, being able to figure out what to do with that, right? Like, that's all it is. But it fits into that model, right? Because
Yeah.
if we're talking about prevention, because that's really what we want to do, we want to prevent kids
Yeah.
from going down this path. We want to give them alternatives. That has to be embedded in what we're doing. And so I don't know that we have a substance abuse curriculum. I have never heard that. But let me write that down, because that is certainly something I'm going to ask about.
And to think that we are in 2022 and we have as many students as we have in our district, and we don't have a substance abuse curriculum is beyond me. It's just beyond me.
No, those are pieces that we have to build into what we're doing,
Yeah.
because frankly, those are life skills.
Of course they are, sure.
Right? Like, our kids need to know how to take care of their bodies. And
Yeah.
that is one of the pieces that they need to know.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that stuff gets missed, because we kind of get the impression that if we talk to kids about it, they're going to go and do it.
Yeah.
That's not the case. We know that's not the case.
No.
We know that, having open conversations actually takes away that desire to go do those things, right? But when we make it this like really taboo thing that we don't talk about, we don't talk about substances, we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about, any of that stuff, then it makes kids more curious, and it makes them try to find out for themselves.
I can tell you that I have, back in my early recovery days when I was still an intern, I talked at schools all over Rhode Island, and I was amazed at how much kids already knew, but maybe didn't have the right information. They could talk about it, but they didn't have the right information, So not thinking that they don't know is just foolishness,
And let's face it, our kids have access to Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, right? They're on all of these social media platforms.
Yeah.
If you think that, if any of us as parents, if we think that our kids are not getting information from those platforms, because they are certainly getting information. And so we are much better off if we provide them with correct information, if we provide them with resources, and we provide them with the opportunity to talk about this stuff in a safe way, instead of running over to social media, because that's where they're getting it. They're going to get it one way or another. So let's try to be preventative in what we're doing.
Absolutely. And there are a lot, today we've come so far, right, in this field, that today you can purchase a ready-made curriculum, a step-by-step with all the workbooks, the whole 9 yards, and you basically just implement it, I can say it's easy because I've done it for so long, but there are people out here in the community that will help, if there's an issue like that. We have the sheriff's office that has a program called SLAM. Students learning a message. At one time, the kids used to leave the school department, go up to the jail, they get a tour, they talk to inmates, and the inmates would then go to the school and talk to them there. These are the types of hands-on things that don't cost money, and we can do them. And
we know those have bigger impacts on kids. When kids hear directly from the people that have lived experience,
Yeah.
it's more meaningful for them. So I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting that we have that happen. We're not going to take kindergartners and go have that
No, no,
conversation,
no,
but
no,
we're going to
no.
present that differently with the kindergartners in the realm of, how do we take
Yeah.
care of our bodies and,
Yeah.
being safe and those kinds of things. And then as they get older, those are the conversations we're going to have with them. And it's so
Sure.
much more meaningful when we have folks
Yeah.
with lived experience
Yeah.
coming in and talking to them about it.
Absolutely, and you'll be surprised you bring a kid in his first year of high school, second year of high school to a jail, and you have him go inside of a cell and you close the door, just letting him hear the cling of the door. You can see they turn like the color, like it's like, and you say like this could be your future, and you open the door and you say, oh, this could be, it's really your choice. Um, there's a lot of impact on them because they're at that age.
They are. And, when teenagers are at that place, they know everything.
Yep,
I often tell parents that I work with, like, oh, your child's a teenager now. Congratulations, you now live with somebody who knows absolutely everything,
that's
because
right.
that's how teenagers operate.
Yep,
But they are more likely to listen and more likely to really integrate what people are saying when they can experience something firsthand. So when they're
absolutely.
hearing from somebody with that lived experience, when they're having those open conversations with somebody that's not a parent, because we become the people that don't know anything when parents know nothing. That's kind of how we roll. It's so much more meaningful, and we can be so
Oh
much
yeah,
more proactive when we're doing
yeah,
that.
yeah. And
Yeah,
lastly, I think what people miss when they think about what are you going to teach my kid that and this and that is they forget that prevention is prevention. Whether I'm teaching you skills to identify dangerous areas that you're going to use in your everyday life, so you don't get your purse taken, so you don't get kidnapped walking home from school. Prevention can be used in so many ways.
right. We're trying to help kids keep themselves safe, not teach them that the world is a scary place, because we actually know that the world is much safer than what it used to be. The problem is that we have much more resources to have information spread. And so we find out about things much quicker. It's like something happens and boom, 3 seconds later, somebody knows about it. Creates a sense of
Yeah,
anxiety for us.
yeah,
But when
yeah.
we can give kids and families tools to keep themselves safe and protected, that actually helps reduce anxiety. That helps reduce
I
those
agree.
things that
Yep,
lead our kids to make bad decisions.
I agree. Well, unfortunately, we got to cut it short. We're at about 35 minutes now.
I told you
Um,
I can talk all day.
I know, but that's okay because we have so much more to talk about. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try to, after I get through the whole school committee, I'm going to try to set up maybe every few weeks we come on like once a month and
Happy
just
to
touch
chat.
base. And if you ever need anything, please reach out. We're always here.
All righty. Have a great night.
And thank you very much for your
No
time.
problem. I'm going to go back to work now.
There you go. Okay,
Have a
folks.
great night.
Great. Folks, thank you for tuning in to the Bottom Line Special Edition. That was Sarah Rodricks from the school committee. And it was a pleasant conversation, very intelligent lady. And I look forward to some more conversation with her. So for now, please share this among your family and friends. And everybody stay safe. Thank you.